Good morning and welcome to the HopeFilled Financial Podcast and happy Valentine's Day. Today I have a very special episode where I get to do an interview with my wife and we get to talk about some of our favorite Valentine's Day stories, some of our favorite stories from dating, and about how budgeting and communicating about money has impacted us since our dating relationship on through into our marriage relationship. Before we jump into the interview, I have a story to share with you. Back when we were dating and getting really close to, okay, is the relationship going to result in marriage? I had to make a decision. I had to decide whether or not I was going to propose. Naturally, you know that we're married now, so I did. But the thing that weighed on me the most was making sure that I asked in a way that was going to be memorable and meaningful, and that the ring reflected that moment and was just as memorable and reflective of our relationship. And I would like to share with you the story of how I designed my wife's ring for her. Back when we started dating, I had gotten her a two-tone rose gold and white gold diamond necklace that's in the shape of a cross. I wanted to reflect that same two-tone design, rose gold and white gold, in her ring. Amanda's patron saint is Saint Rose of Lima, so rose is very meaningful to her. In wanting to make something that represented us, we were a couple of nerds dating. We like to talk an awful lot about chemistry and physics. Amanda was the chemistry nerd and I was the physics nerd. One day I got to share one of my favorite physicists of all time in his discovery. The physicist is de Broglie, and the discovery is de Broglie wavelength. He wrote his thesis over the idea that massless particles could have momentum, and if you could set the momentum of a massless particle equal to the momentum of something that had mass, then you could solve for a waveform for a particle with mass. It's complicated. It's the birth of quantum mechanics. If you're a nerd like me, it's something that gets you very excited. But the concept of a wavelength for a mass particle and where you have a wave indicates where that particle could exist. It led us to referring to each other as each other's particles, the same wavelength, but existing differently. Just like it's said that when you get married, you're one flesh, you're one unit, you're bound together spiritually. So we called each other my other particle. So I designed a ring where the diamond was at the node of the wavelength, and there's a little rose gold sine wave that covers two little trillions that are adjacent to the diamond. And the two little trillions were to represent us in the relationship, and the diamond was to represent God at the center of the relationship, at the node, holding the waveform together. I thought that was really symbolic of who we were as a couple, how important our faith was to us, and it represented everything that I could have hoped to be in a ring in one thing. The problem was is no such setting exists, so I had to have it designed from scratch. Having a custom setting port isn't the most frugal way to go. However, if I were to get the setting designed separately and have it done at a deal, and I find the diamond wholesale, and I purchased the trillions as something that would be less expensive, I ended up going with man-made moissanite, which, if you look it up, is almost as hard as diamond and makes a much brighter sparkle of rainbow through it. They call it fire. And by arranging the setting, I could make it look like the diamond was bigger than it was, and I could do it in a way that would cost me an awful lot less buying a setting of an equivalent caliper. The ring on the whole, I had it appraised after it was all done and I had gotten all the different pieces together for it. And it appraised for about double the amount of money that I put in to have the ring made. In the end, designing the ring turned out to be a very frugal and beautiful way for me to put an engagement ring together. And it was something that I loved doing. It was something that was meaningful then, it was meaningful at the engagement, and it's still meaningful now. One thing that was really fun is my wife got to design a matching wedding ring for me, which has the same waveform but shifted by a third of a phase in triplicate. There's one wave that has the rose gold and the white gold together, so it waves. And then the other two waves are etched in, and together they resemble a trinity of waves or three-phase power. I had just gotten started with a career as an electrical engineer, designing hospitals and skyscrapers. So having something that not only matched our relationship, matched her ring, but matched my education and engineering was something that was very special and meaningful for me. And I remember we had the rings done at the same jeweler. We walked in one day to get them cleaned after the fact, and one of the ladies at the jeweler recognized us and said, "Oh, oh, this is the couple that has my favorite ring that we've ever done." And I was like, "Oh, this she must have really liked the ring I designed." And she's like, "It's my favorite wedding band that's ever been done for a man in our store." They really liked the ring that my wife designed for me too. And I think that thought carries over into the way that we hold our marriage together and the way that we communicate about everything that matters to us in our marriage. It pours over into the way that we budget together. And that brings us to the budget tip of today. The budget tip of today is to make sure that you always, whether dating or married, include a line item for dates. It's important to remember that if you are married, that doesn't mean you stop dating your spouse. And it's important to be continuing to put time and effort to continue deepening and strengthening your married relationship. Even if you're practicing communicating and working together in the day to day and early on in the marriage, every day just feels like an extended awesome date because you get to live together and it's awesome and start raising a family. It's still nice to look back at that time when you were dating and you did things like you wrote each other little notes, or you went out for a fancy dinner, or you did something extra special for Valentine's Day. In the budget, you can have a line item for that. You can have a line item that says, we're going to spend this much doing something fun together. Or we're you're allowed to spend this much and I'm allowed to spend this much and we're going to surprise each other. It's the way that we do our Christmas gifts in that regard. But you can do that with dates too. One thing that was really cool, and we'll talk about it in the interview, is that in our wedding we had people write down all sorts of date ideas and put it on a popsicle stick. Before we write our monthly budget, what we do is we pull out a popsicle stick from the vase. This is in order to inspire us, give us an idea of whether or not a date this month, if we follow the popsicle stick, is going to cost any money. If we follow the popsicle stick, we can kind of come up with an idea of how much, say, going to a movie is going to cost, or this particular month it's building a tower out of Legos. Well, if we have Legos, then that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And even if you don't end up putting money toward it, toward dates, that line item is a constant and consistent and persistent reminder that your relationship is valuable and you need to be putting time, talent, and treasure into strengthening your relationship forever and always. And that's a beautiful thing. With that, and without further ado, I give you the interview with my beautiful wife. Today, we have an extremely important guest, someone who's special and near and dear to my heart, my favorite person in the entire world, and the editor of the HopeFilled Financial Podcast, my beautiful wife, Amanda. Amanda, thank you so much for sitting in and joining us on the podcast in person. Everyone who watches on YouTube gets to see your picture on my desk, but this is the first time that you've gotten to be on the podcast and not just editing it.
It's really my pleasure. I enjoy being a part of your life in every aspect.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
I want to know, of the Valentine's Days that we've had, which one was your favorite? Do you know? Or is that too hard of a question to pick?
No, I think there's a clear winner. And
Okay.
I think you know what it is. I was living by myself in an apartment in Council Grove, Kansas. I was teaching and I enjoyed some alone time to where I could pull off some greater Valentine's Day romance. And I had cut these ham steaks into the shape of a heart. I made brownies in little silicone muffin tins. They were heart shaped. I wrote a lot of little notes on pieces of paper that were shaped like hearts also. And lo and behold, Jay had done something similar. He had written an exorbitant amount of notes on hearts as well. It was just a really, really nice time. We got to really share our hearts with one another. It was early on enough in our relationship that we were still pretty.
We still had the butterflies and
Yeah.
stuff, and it was just like all new and exciting, and the sparks of new dating.
But it wasn't so new to where we weren't like reserved and not wanting to show our hearts and
Right,
our cards.
We could be a little transparent with each other in that regard. With all the little notes, there were so many. The fun part about doing that for you is to just spread it out over a long period of time. I was writing my thesis, right? Back around that Valentine's Day. So in between writing things and in between homework and stuff, every time I needed a break, I would come up with some sort of either pun or something cute or something funny or something loving and sincere and write it down, fold the heart up and drop it in the little pumpkin so I could bring it to you on Valentine's Day.
It's really amazing what you can do when you spread it out and do it little bits at a time. I learned that in caring for Oliver too. When you only have little snippets of time, you have to kind of make the most of it and be intentional about it. And that was what you did.
Mm-hmm.
You made intentional moments to make a lot of little hearts that kind of blew me away because I was really like, how did you have time to do all of this? I remember feeling like a little bit guilty, like, why is he doing all of this for me? I don't deserve for you to spend money on me and time that you don't have.
I didn't spend too much money on you that Valentine's Day. I think it was a bigger investment of time. And I think that's what mattered more to you, was when there was an investment of time as opposed to an investment in money.
Quality time is my love language. And so I always cared more about spending time with you, and your gift to me of that quality time was most important. And I think that's why the exorbitant amount of notes was so special to me, because it represented a lot of time that you took to do that for me.
The next year, you invested even more time than you did the year prior for Valentine's Day. You had photographs from a lot of different favorite parts of our relationship up to that point, and you filled the entire back of like these 4x6 photographs with notes. And I remember like the couple months leading up to Valentine's Day, it made you all sorts of smiling and grateful and thankful.
I think I just wrote one every day.
leading up to Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was before or after that Valentine's Day that I finally learned how to dance. I picked it up and finally like connected when you asked me to help chauffeur prom.
Hmm.
Because in Council Grove, you were a teacher. What all did you teach for those who don't know what you used to do before you had Oliver?
I taught chemistry and anatomy to high schoolers at Council Grove. And then I went on to teach middle school science and chemistry and biology in Utah.
And we chauffeured prom in Council Grove, and then I helped you with another dance when it came to Utah too.
The Halloween dance.
The Halloween dance. That wasn't Valentine's Day stuff, but it was still really fun.
Hmm.
Was the investment of being able to go to school functions as valuable as like spending time together for Valentine's Day and coming up with notes?
Oh, absolutely. I looked at my parents as an example in that regard because my mom is a teacher and my dad is always helping her with school projects and going to school functions with her and going to prom with her. And so I viewed that in growing up as a really loving thing. And for you to do that with me was really special.
Yeah. I remember back when I was writing my thesis, most of the time we had together was actually just grading. I was
Hmm.
a graduate teaching assistant, and you were teaching the classes you had in Council Grove. So you would have papers and homework to grade, and I would have like drawings to grade and homework to do. So we would meet together either at my parents' house or your place in Council Grove, and we would just grade papers.
Hmm. It
And
was a lot of grading back then.
did you appreciate the let's meet up and do work together more than let's go out and get sushi or go to dinner, or was it different?
Oh, each has their place, and sometimes work needs to be done, and it's nice to do that work with someone. So that has its place, but also there's a place to go out and have fun and to enjoy time away from work. And luckily, we were able to do both together.
Mm-hmm. Now that we've been married for a few years now, what reflects more or less of our day to day in married life? Would it be the dates where we were working together or the dates where we would get to go out and do something special and unique?
Well, we work together in a different way now. We sacrifice for each other in different ways now. Last year for Valentine's Day, I was holding a 3 or 4 month old and making a pizza at the same time. That was a challenge and that was a sacrifice, and I was actually very proud of myself for pulling it off. And it wasn't the wow factor, and there wasn't near as many little notes or near as much time that went into that Valentine's Day, but it was a different kind of sacrifice and it was a different kind of special. We really do get the best of both worlds. When Oliver is napping, then we can enjoy that quality time together. And when we have him together, it's our job. It's like grading, but watching a toddler be adorable and watching the spouse be just the most amazing father.
Aw. Early in the podcast, I tell the story of how I designed your engagement ring. It's not near the most expensive ring, and it's not the biggest rock under the sun, to say the least. But there was a lot of time and thought that was put into it. And what matters more, and when it comes to gift giving outside of special events, like not just the ring, but for just the day to day, is it the time or the money that gets poured into something that matters more?
That's kind of hard because outright I want to just say time, but also your money costs you time that you work. And
Mm-hmm.
so both are important and both have value. And sometimes it's actually a bit more of a sacrifice to spend a little bit more giving something that you know that person would really need or enjoy, because you're sacrificing something of your own that you would have bought or that you would have saved towards, or an extra however many hours you would work to earn that money.
And how's gift giving changed, like, mentally for you since now being married? Our finances are combined. Meanwhile, back when we were dating, naturally our finances were separate. So now what's mine is yours and yours is mine entirely.
Mhm.
All my worldly goods I pledge to thee, and vice versa. Does the gift giving or time or anything change from dating to marriage for you?
I think the biggest difference is that we get to make all of our decisions together. That's really awesome. I had a lot of anxiety on my own before marriage because I had to make all these decisions on my own. And I was so afraid that I was going to make the wrong choice, no matter what it was, even something simple. I didn't want to make a wrong choice. And so now I have a lot of confidence when we make our decisions together. When we give gifts to each other, we always give each other a little budget, and we kind of decide what our limit is going to be spending on each other. And it gives me permission to spend more than maybe I would have otherwise, because I was afraid
Mm-hmm.
that I was going to spend too much money, that I would have blown something, that I wouldn't have been able to afford something down the road unforeseen. But when we make those decisions together, then I feel confident and I enjoy getting to give without guilt.
Back to the budget. How did budgets impact our life in early dating? Right before we officially started dating, you asked me to help you with a budget spreadsheet.
You planted a seed in me that I needed to be a bit more intentional and organized with my finances, even though I was thrifty and I didn't spend much and I had plenty of savings. I had this lump sum of money that I didn't know if it was going to be enough for XYZ, but once you gave me that tool to where we could write it all down and assign a dollar amount and see that, yeah, I am covered for this and for that. It gave me permission later down the road to buy a car, cut a check, and not feel any pain. I would have absolutely had a panic attack prior if I just cut a $15,000 check. But that was thought through and accounted for, and there was still enough for the other things. And it made that experience really, really nice.
And that car purchase, that was the RAV after we got married. You'd only ever owned one car,
Mm-hmm.
on since high school,
Grand Prix.
Grand Prix, and you picked that one because of the color.
Yep. I knew nothing about cars. I I was so clueless. Thank goodness for my dad. He was there every step of the way. I said I like this one because it's pretty, and he said, "Well, yeah, it'll work."
And he did a good job taking care of that thing because he changed the oil on it for you, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
That was a pretty thrifty way to save on the maintenance for the car and know that it was done right.
Right.
Because your dad works on an awful lot of farm equipment.
Oh yeah, he
Mm-hmm.
is a handyman. He is just incredible.
With the budgeting and the savings allocation, did you experience any resistance while we were dating or when we were first married to having a savings allocation plan or budgeting?
Yes, because it was challenging up front. You always have some level of resistance to things you don't understand yet, and things that you haven't practiced, and things that are challenging.
And it wasn't something that you felt like you had to do, probably because you were fairly thrifty and you didn't ever spend if you didn't want to spend or
Right.
you didn't need to spend.
Right. I've made it this far through my life without budgeting. Why do I need to learn how to do this now?
Hmm.
But you gave me very real reasons, and you gave me a lot of peace from actually changing the way I do things.
On the other side of actually making budgeting a regular habit,
Hmm.
leading up to marriage, I think we did 3 practice budget meetings, and we did it because we were long distance engaged. We did it over Zoom calls. And if I recall, none of those 3 practice budget meetings went very well. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the specifics, but I agree with you that I don't think they were entirely pleasant.
I was always excited going into those practice budget meetings, like, yay, this is going to be awesome. I'm so excited to try this. And then I'd walk away and I'd be like, oh, that just felt awful. It had me a little worried about how actually practicing a budget married was going to go. If I remember right, our first month married, we did a budget meeting and it went really well. Is that right? Am I
Yeah,
remembering right?
it's like all those graces from our marriage flowed into everything, including our finances.
We haven't missed a single month since we've been married for
Mm-mm.
writing a monthly budget. What have you learned doing like a joint financial plan with me that you didn't have like before while we were dating?
In practical terms, you learn how to apply everything, and you learn how to be more flexible, and you learn how to pivot mid month when something happens. Earlier on in my life, that would have thrown me off, and I would have been all doom and gloom. It's the end of the world. How are we going to I can't. Well, that was the big problem with me from the beginning was I wanted the budget to be perfect, and there was no way it was ever going to work out the way we had planned. And for me, that was just a why even bother trying? Jay has been a model for me of that. Okay, let's pivot, let's reallocate some things, let's change things around and make it work. It doesn't have to be exactly what you started it out as at the beginning of month.
Especially with like the utility bills. Just this last month, we
Mm,
had a good example. Our utility bills came in way higher than we thought they were going to be.
yeah.
So we had to, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, kind of have a mid-month budget meeting and say, okay, here's how much the utilities actually are. What are we going to change?
Right.
And that really didn't take too much time. We didn't even like
No.
schedule a time to sit down and go over it. I just kind of I put the numbers in, said, all right, we've got X number of dollars that need shifted around. Where should we move them? With budgeting, do you think it's improved our communication in marriage?
Absolutely.
How?
100%. I mean, we have to be on the same page about how we live. Your finances, your money allow you to do things and give your values and your virtues life. When we have the same values, when we can look at that budget and see which categories are the top priorities for us and we can agree on that, then we can agree that, yeah, eating out this month isn't going to make the cut because these are other things that our priorities need to be taken care of.
Are there examples of dates that you can think of recently that didn't cost anything or did cost and we put it in the budget and we're real intentional about it? They were like very memorable and meaningful.
We recently did a food challenge. So we each got $10 and went to the grocery store and bought random things that were on sale, things that we thought would be fun, things that we thought would be interesting and challenging. And then we came home and I drew 4 different ingredients from a hat from things that I had in the pantry or in the fridge that needed to be used up. And then we had to figure out how to make a meal out of all of those ingredients. And we did it together collaboratively. And it was a lot of fun. And, you know, collectively, it only cost $20. And you can't hardly eat out for that as a couple anymore these days. So it was still a relatively cheap date, and we had a really lovely meal and a fun time creating that together. I remember a fun date in Utah. We built a blanket fort and we got out the little green army men and we played knock over the army men and made mug cakes and enjoyed our mug cakes in the army fort tent thing that we made.
And we watched a movie, I think, too.
Just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was fun. And that was free. If you had one word of advice for couples who are on the fence about budgeting or resisting the idea of engaging in a budget because it takes effort, the path of least resistance is to not. Mm-hmm. And arguably, it's difficult keeping track of your finances and communicating about where your treasure's going without a budget. But it's also taking effort to write a budget. You have to pick between which challenge you want to have. So what word of advice do you have for the young couple who's on the fence about it?
Just do it. It brings you a lot more peace and unity as a couple. And you can really develop those priorities, and you're going to feel a lot more confident about your decisions. You've got something to base it off of. You know you're taken care of because you have it written on a plan. And you know that you're going to be okay if you have an extra high bill because you can see where you can pull it from and you can make it work. When all of that is unknown, it's just anxiety inducing. And that's when you're going to start a fight because you're both anxious and you have no evidence to prove the contrary, and things just escalate a lot faster. When you have a plan, when you have evidence, when you have a budget, you have something that's going to mediate that anxiety, mediate those potential arguments, and bring you closer together.
That was really well said. I don't think I could have said it better myself. That was awesome. Well, thank you for sitting down and talking today and celebrating Valentine's Day with a couples podcast talking about dating and a little bit of our story and how money fits into that equation. And happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
I hope you found the interview both enlightening, educational, and entertaining. It was a real treat to be able to talk to Amanda on the podcast and to be able to share some of our story with you. If you and your spouse are struggling with communicating about money or wanting to figure out where to start, you can reach out to me through HopeFilled Financial Coaching and sign up for a free consultation. And I will be able to sit down with you and talk to you where you are and help guide you on the next steps that are going to help strengthen your relationship in the way of communicating with personal finance. I'll be able to help guide you through what can make a marriage that's struggling with communicating on money good, and take a good marriage and make it feel great. And that it's just a true blessing to be able to do that and serve you. Until next week, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future, and happy Valentine's Day.